So thank you, gentlemen, for carving out this time. I think it might be best for some introductions. We can just go to where you are at Locality Bank and kind of take it from there. So Drew, do you want to go ahead and kind of
Sure.
introduce yourself?
Good morning. Drew Saito, co-founder, chief lending officer of Locality Bank. Just a quick bio on me. I was born and raised in Fort Lauderdale. I've spent the last 22 years in banking. Right out of college, I was a finance and international business major from Florida State University, and right out of college, I got into the securities business. Spent about 2 years in bond sales, and then I switched into banking. And so I've been in pretty much community banking for the last 20 years.
Keith?
Yeah, hi, Keith Costello. I'm the president, CEO, and also a co-founder of Locality Bank, and got about a 30 plus year career in banking, all really spent in South Florida. Started at another bank in 2009, which was sold to Centennial Bank, and then was the CEO of another bank in Orlando called First Green Bank, which we sold to Seacoast Bank in 2018. Drew and I worked together there, and then we started this bank in January of 2022.
Okay, great. Thanks. Corey?
Yeah, I'm Corey LeBlanc. I am the Chief Operating Officer and the Chief Technology Officer, as well as one of the three co-founders of Locality Bank. I started my banking career a little bit differently. I actually started in the Air Force as a 3CO, so I was a communication computer system operator. For the non-Air Force people that know FSCs, I was an IT nerd. I built infrastructure and cyber networks for 6 years active duty, and then transitioned into banking, where I found that the modernization of banking was starting, but that people in the technology world, particularly in infrastructure, can make a big impact on the way that financial services were delivered to customers. And actually, only had three jobs my entire life. I was in the Air Force. I worked for 15 years as a CTO at another bank. And then Keith and Drew called me and said they wanted to start a bank, and here I am.
Well, thank you for your service. Does the military apply to anybody else? Does anybody else have military experience? Oh, Keith?
Yes, I actually went to college on an ROTC scholarship at the University of Tampa, and then served for 5 years in the Army.
Army. Okay, and
Yep.
thank you for your service. I do not. It was not a part of my background. Drew, I'm guessing no for you as well.
No, I
Okay.
probably, my parents should have probably shipped me off to serve in the military. It probably would have been good for me, but no, I did not serve.
Yeah, the closest I got was my dad. My dad worked for the U.S. Navy as an engineer, a drafting engineer, not a mechanical engineer, for actually the bulk of my childhood. Until he retired. He's gone now. Anyway, okay. So anyway, thank you for that. I guess Keith, you kind of hinted at this, but I'm curious how the three of you either met or got together or connected. I mean, you've obviously tackled this gigantic task of founding a new bank, but clearly there had to be some background there in solidifying this triumvirate. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how that happened. I'm not sure. Drew, maybe you can lead off on that, how this, you kind of all gelled.
So, yeah, I guess I'll kind of start it off, and then Keith and Corey could fill in the details. But so Keith and I have known each other for 15 plus years, just being in Fort Lauderdale in the banking business, involved in our community. Ironically, Keith had sold a bank, one of his previous banks, and was riding out his non-compete, and we worked out in the same CrossFit gym. And I remember, we knew each other, so I think it was a Saturday or a Sunday. It was like a partner workout, and at the end of the workout, we're drinking Gatorade water and just rehydrating. And we're just catching up. And hey, Keith, what are you up to? And the story goes where basically, Keith is saying, oh, I feel like I want to get back into the business, and I would like to maybe acquire a bank or start a bank. And so I told Keith at that moment, count me in if you do something. And then fast forward, these conversations at the gym turned into serious conversations at a coffee shop, and where we really started to talk about, from a business plan strategic standpoint, what locality today would look like. And so that was kind of the genesis of it. And Keith, I don't know if you want to take it from there.
Yeah, so Drew, that was First Green.
Oh yes, that was
Yeah,
actually
so
First Green.
that was
Yes.
a bank before this one. Was when you and I were at CrossFit.
Oh yes, that's right. I'm getting my stories
So
mixed up.
so I had an opportunity to go in and become. We did a change of control, brought in some new investors to a bank in Orlando called First Green Bank, and so Drew and I, that was when we first worked together. We knew each other from the community and things, but we had never worked together before. So with First Green, that was our first time working together. And that bank, as I said, was headquartered in Orlando. I stayed in Fort Lauderdale. I would commute back and forth to Orlando, and we rolled out kind of the South Florida division of that bank, and then ended up selling that in October of 2018. And then I had a 2-year non-compete as a result of that sale. And it was during that time, actually, frankly, we started talking, Drew, myself, and there were some others involved too, that we started talking even before we sold the bank. Like, maybe we should do another bank. And what would we do this time? How would we do it differently? And and that was kind of when Drew and I started talking about it. And then Corey came into it when I was just, I was on this non-compete and just I was bored out of my mind, and COVID's going on. And so I know that one thing that Drew and I talked about, even as I say, before we sold, we were like, hey, this fintech stuff is really big. Technology's really, becoming a game changer, and you've got to embrace technology to be successful. And so we're like, listen, the next bank we do, we want to go all in on technology. And we're like, yeah, but we don't have anybody that has been on our teams that understands digital banking, technology. And we're like, yeah, that's a problem. So started on LinkedIn, just kind of getting into these little, texting, sending messages to different people who were on all these different, who are kind of visible in the industry, talking about what they're doing and talking about digital banking, technology, fintech. And so out of all these I had lots of conversations, because obviously I don't have anything else to do with my time at this point. So so I start getting into like a text thing with Corey on messaging on LinkedIn, and apparently Corey thinks I'm some creep in South Florida. and he's like not even reading these, but his wife Cassie, who we owe Corey being here today to Cassie, really, because Cassie sees this message from me and she's like, hey Corey, this guy actually is for real, you should talk to him. And I'll let Corey take it from here.
Yeah, no, I absolutely thought I was getting fished. I mean, nobody reaches out to you on LinkedIn to start a bank. That's not a thing, right? And this is at the beginning of COVID, where everyone's starting to transition to digital. And I think I was on a podcast with a buddy of mine talking about what banks should be doing to prepare for what's coming after the pandemic, right? Instead of waiting to respond, we should be building technology and doing all these things. And it's just perfectly timed. So yeah, I ignored it. My wife was managing my social. She said, no, he actually is connected to a lot of the bankers that you know. You should at least talk to him. And, it started off, I had zero interest in starting a bank, to be honest with you. I was very happy at the institution I was at. We had grown quite well, and I loved the company that I was a part of. But as I talked to Keith more and more in the evenings on what he wanted to do, I realized I was having more fun talking to Keith than doing my day job. So I instantly realized I had a problem, and my wife was right, and Keith was right, and we needed to do something different. So it's the easiest decision I ever made once I finally got to know these two guys.
Was that tech position in the financial services, or was it another industry altogether?
It was. I was the CTO for about 15 years for at the time when I started there, it was a $640 million asset bank, and we grew it to about 7.5 billion when I left. We had recently went IPO about 2 years before COVID, which means as a technologist you sit on your hands a little bit. So I was getting a little anxious, kind of chomping at the bit to do something for real again. And then the pandemic kicked us in the teeth, right? So perfect timing for Keith and Drew to reach out.
And maybe this goes to Keith, but again, I'm interested in the group sort of think on this. What is the pivot moment in where you are that leads you to think, let's start a new bank? I mean, is it that your current position, you're seeing opportunities that are missed, or you're seeing a gap in the market, or you're seeing a customer base that you can serve in a different way? Or is it just kind of a general feeling of maybe there's something better in doing something different? I'm thinking of like the colonists leaving England and coming to the New World. Like, we've had it here, we're out. Is it that, or is it just a desire to kind of take things in a new direction?
I think it wasn't anything as dramatic as the colonists, but
Well, that's good to know.
that's pretty,
I'm happy for that. It wasn't quite so
pretty,
revolutionary
it's
as
a
I
tough
had
one
maybe
on
cast
that.
it.
But I would say, yeah, so, we already, as I say, like Drew and I were already talking, as we sold that last bank, we were already talking about doing another bank, and we were talking about the importance of technology. But I think one of the things that occurred while I'm on this non-compete, which was really a huge revelation to me, was that we had PPP occur, and the failure of the banking system to accommodate all of these small, medium-sized businesses was dramatic, right? Because I experienced it, because a lot of the clients that we had at the other bank were blowing up my phone as I was. And I'm like, hey, I don't have a bank anymore. I have a non-compete. I can't help you. I'll try to find a bank to help you. Drew was experiencing, the same thing. He was actually working at a bank trying to help people at the same time, but also having to refer people from, larger bankers were even calling us and saying, hey, we can't handle these people. Can you help us? And so it was like, wow, this is really an issue. So it caused me to go back and look at what's going on. So in Broward County, Florida, which is where we are located, where Fort Lauderdale is, I looked at what was the situation in terms of community banks. How many were there headquartered here in 2015? And there were 11. And the total assets, and Broward County, roughly probably $80 billion, or maybe even more. That's a rough estimate of the amount of deposits in Broward County. 11 billion of that was in community banks, so it's pretty not bad. And we looked at it by the time 2020 came around, there were only 3 banks that were currently headquartered in Broward County, and the total assets were 600 and something million. So the consolidation of banks over that 5-year period of time had really left very few local banks here in Fort Lauderdale in Broward County. So that to me was a wake-up call that, we're on the right track here. And so one of the things that we did before we decided to launch and go out and really spend a lot of time, energy, and our own money was to talk to the business groups in Broward County, and particularly the Broward Workshop, which is kind of the key decision makers for the business community in Broward. And we went to them and said, do you believe we need a bank, another bank? Because, we've got the people who can start it. And they were like, yes. It was a resounding yes, we need that. And oh, by the way, will you all write a check to capitalize this bank? Because that's what we need. We need your support, and we need you to bank here and we can run the bank and we can get it going, but we need the support. And so that was a resounding, really response, we thought, to say, yes, you guys are on the right track. So that was it for me.
That's sort of the classic seeing a need, identifying the need. That's why the new bank exists. I mean, it's entrepreneurialism 101, right? You see the need and you fill it.
Yeah, and just to add to what Keith was saying, what struck me during COVID and when the PPP program was going on, I have a lot of friends that are local executives at the time it was SunTrust, Bank of America, a friend of mine at Wells. These are people that are in a leadership role, and they were calling me while I'm at home working remote, obviously, saying, "Hey, I've got a client. Can you help them?" Or, "Hey, my uncle needs a PPP loan," and my response to them is, "You're in management at your bank. Can't you help them?" And their response to me was, "I don't even know who to call in my company." And so that just kind of showed the dysfunctionality, I feel like, especially during the PPP program. And I also believe that during COVID and coming out of COVID on the tail end of the PPP program, a lot of business owners realized that their relationship with their bank or their banker was not as strong as they thought it was. So, that when we, like Keith mentioned, went out to the business community and asked everybody, do you feel like there is a need for a local bank to serve local business owners and entrepreneurs? I mean, we didn't have a single person that told us no, that there's no need a need in the community for something like that.
And if you think about it too, Dan, just look at last year. Community banks decreased by about 2.2%, right? Why? And if you look at, if we just look back at 2014, which is kind of like this pivotal year, in my opinion, for the advancement of digital services being used across in all industries, where people were starting to prefer being digital over physical, right? We had about 6,100 community banks in the U.S. at that time. Today we have around 4,500, right? Maybe a little less, I think, than that. It's been a continual decline. And the cause of that is consolidation by acquisition, right? These large regional banks come pick up these small community banks because they don't really have a path to grow. And so what Keith and Drew were proposing, whenever I came on board, was to rethink that, create a blueprint, create a bank that's a community bank that can sustain modernization and evolution to the point where we could keep growing and serving the community in a meaningful way.
Corey, can we dig a little bit more into the tech piece?
Sure.
As a differentiator, as a kind of competitive edge or different way. I think obviously COVID changed everybody's relationship with every business they interact with, whether it's the plumber down the street or the bank that's keeping their lights on. If you could just kind of talk about what you've seen or how, I should say, how Locality kind of came out of that COVID nightmare with a sort of forward, progressive, interesting view of how to integrate tech.
Well, the way we looked at it when we started was that we didn't want to be a shiny object, right? It wasn't about online and mobile banking solely. Ideally, right, you have to have a good experience there. And we knew that to be the case. But what we wanted to do is foundationally build an organization that was going to be agile enough to move and adjust quickly to changing demands or requirements for the customers. And we were seeing that with the pandemic. So COVID taught us a lot, right? There was a lot of uncertainty coming out of the pandemic that people really didn't know how these banking institutions or even retail institutions were going to be able to survive in the future. How were they going to respond, right? Because it took them months and years to do so. And what we wanted to do was build a foundation on an infrastructure and architecture that we could respond in days, weeks, and months as opposed to months and years. And that was very, very important to us. So I would say that over the first couple of years, the differentiation isn't substantial maybe from some of the large banks with their digital capability. But if you look at the combination of how we use digital to complement someone like a Drew Saito or a Henry Mendez or a George Sanchez or some of our bankers in the local market, that's the differentiator, right? It's not the technology being the business, it's having a tool set that complements the business bankers and the relationships we could build to actually sit down and make a difference.
And was there like what drove that realization? Was there like this light bulb moment where you're thinking, this is how we better connect, this is our way path forward? Uh, if
Well,
you,
yeah, just looking at what was going on, right? You started to see the transition in a number of industries outside of banking. You saw banking starting to focus more on digital services. But I don't know that very many banks really sat down with customers to ask what they actually wanted with those digital services and why they wanted to use those digital services. What we did is at the very beginning, one of the first things that I wanted to do was start to talk to people in various industries to see how they use banking. And so I would start with three questions, right? The first question was, who do you bank with and who's your primary bank? And so they would tell me everyone had a primary bank, every single one of them. I said, oh, that's great. So that's the bank you get your loans from. Well, it depends. I actually get my capital from these. Oh, that's great. So that's the bank you use to settle your payments. Well, we actually use Stripe and we have to, and it just kind of became this thing where we realized that there was probably like 4 to 6 relationships that the business owner had to orchestrate to solve their financial like dilemma, right? To manage their business, which wasn't what they were in business to do, right? They were in business to, bake cakes or, build buildings, or whatever that may be. But instead, they were having to put a good amount of time into putting these things together. And so the third question that I would ask them was like, well, do you like doing all that stuff? And they said, no, absolutely not. I wish that this, and this was, available to me. And so what we realized is in order to provide that this, and this, it was somewhat different from every different industry and company that we talked to. We had to have a platform that was at least going to be integratable, right? And so that we could provide services for everyone without putting a tremendous amount of technical debt on the bank, which then, really makes it hard to grow a community bank and keep it from selling. Uh, so that was kind of some of the thoughts, at least, that went into why we're building the way we are and why it wasn't about throwing out the best mobile banking application on day one. It was more about how do we build something over the next 3, 5, and 10 years that's going to be here for our local communities when they need us.
yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, it's I think it's common for banks and bankers to say, well, we serve our customers, we do what our customers, but you actually went out and asked. I mean, what a better way to find out what people want than actually ask them. But that to me sounds kind of foundational to the culture of Locality Bank. So I'm interested in kind of how that culture was shaped. And maybe Drew, you could grab this because, obviously culture and lending, there's a lot of collaboration there as far as like business that you want to cultivate relationships with, etc. So if you could talk about how kind of that, I'll say rather unique uh, approach to customer culture got baked into the organization. Because it sounds like it was from the very start, which is amazing.
So that's correct. In fact, one of the first things that Corey, Keith, and I did when we were getting together talking about the bank was about corporate culture and the importance of culture. We spent a lot of time identifying what our priorities are, what should be foundational in the culture of the bank. Keith actually, the three of us all pitched in, but we have a culture page. It's very colorful. One of the paramount things in our organization is trust. And so from a corporate culture standpoint, I think that we've done a very good job. If you ask our team members, I think that they will tell you that we take it very seriously and we live it every day. That's the other kind of neat thing about doing a de novo startup, and as opposed to acquiring a bank and growing it. It's like building a house from the ground up versus taking like a a house that you have to do like significant renovations, like you can build this thing the way you want it to look from the ground up, and even on the technology side and pretty much every other component of this business, we built it, and the team, the people, every person was handpicked. So this is like a custom home. Everything that we wanted, we created rather than adopting legacy people and things. And from a customer standpoint, or our approach to customers, this is something. There you go. This is something that we're constantly working on. Corey, Keith, and I have read this book called Unreasonable Hospitality. Corey, in particular, has really embraced this guy Will Guidara, who's in the restaurant business, and he talks about the type of service and experience that really kind of differentiates yourself. And so we're trying to impart these little nuggets, and it's an ongoing process. Like for the rest of this year, going into next year, one of our strategic initiatives is really focusing on concierge banking, the client experience. And these are not things obviously you could just do overnight. We whiteboard process and look at micro steps, and even in a new account opening. The lending process, I have written down, and it's 15 pages, and the little many steps that occur in between that do impact the customer, we examine them to say, okay, there's a little too much friction here. What can we do, even if it's out of the box, to make it simpler, faster, more efficient of a process, with the end goal being it's just an overall better experience for our customer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of like a baker tasting his own cookies. I mean, have you applied for a checking account at your own bank, and do you know what that's like? Is it as smooth as can be? Is it terrific, or is it fraught with this form and that form and duplication, etc.? So, an interesting way of vetting. This is what you set out to do, and this is how you confirm that you're getting there. Interesting. Okay, so I think we've talked about how you got together and where you are now. Keith, I'll turn to you. Where are you headed? What is, now that COVID's in the background, etc., where do you see yourself moving toward?
So we're getting ready to finish up that de novo phase of our operation. So those people who are familiar with starting a bank know that the first 3 years generally are the de novo period, and heightened regulation, very strict adherence to a business plan that the regulators have not objected to, as they put it. They don't approve anything, by the way. They don't object.
Silence is golden.
So we're coming out of that period, and so this creates a lot of new opportunities for us. And I think it's interesting because you're used to almost riding your bike with training wheels, and now they come off and you want to just take off. And part of it, was this last, so we've had 2 strategic planning meetings as an executive team, and the consensus out of those 2, and I think one of the things you have to be careful about is the shiny objects, and I unfortunately am a shiny object person. and I think it was Drew was like, listen, instead of having all these different objectives, why don't we just really focus on a couple? And it was like everybody was nodding, and we were all really in agreement on that. And I think and it's easy to get really distracted. There's a lot of cool things going on in the business, and you want to be part of that, and you want to do the cool things, but sometimes it's better to say, hey, let's just do 2 things and do them really, really well, instead of trying to do 20 things and getting really nothing accomplished. So I think that's been really kind of, as we look at the future and what are we going to focus on, we have zoned in really on the customer experience as our number one strategic initiative, and what we call concierge banking, and Corey is heading up that initiative. And then the other initiative, because we really, our mission is to empower local companies to maximize their potential, and that's been our core mission ever since we started the bank. And we think that's a great. You asked before, what's our why? That's our why. We saw that need during COVID, and we saw that need. I saw it in 2009. I mean, every time there's a crisis, that's when people really need a bank relationship, and the people who find out, get the rug pulled out from under them, are not the Fortune 500 companies. They're the small local companies who find out when they call the bank that they can't get anybody on the phone. So, so that was all of our why. So small business banking, SBA lending is our other initiative. So we have two really that we're very focused on. And then, there are other things that we've talked about that I'm sure, will be sub-initiatives of those things. But those are our two main ones, Dan.
Sure. Yeah. Great. Drew, Corey, do you have anything to add on that, or any other thoughts on where you're heading?
Yeah, I think we obviously want to continue to expand our presence here in Broward County, South Florida. Broward County, I believe, is the seventh largest county in the United States. 67,000 registered businesses here in this county. So there is plenty of business for us to generate, and we want to continue to develop market share. But going back to what Keith was mentioning, I wholeheartedly believe that there are a lot of banks that offer many services but don't do them particularly well. I would rather us just be really, really good with the 3 or 4 main lines of businesses that we are focused on.
Narrow and deep.
That's it.
Narrow and deep.
No, I'd say, Dan, these two guys nailed it, right? The only thing I would add to it is, you hear what Drew said before, and as Keith was talking through this, I think the thing I want to emphasize is the fact that we were built on the concept of changing things, which means as an institution, we're constantly in change, right? And that's something our employees have had to learn really quickly, is that there's not a process, procedure, or anything that isn't intended to be changed at some point. There's no static anything in this organization. Everything is going to be ebbs and flows, and in the effort to do exactly what Keith said, is to help those local businesses be successful. So we're excited. So I mean, just as Drew pointed out, talking about onboarding experiences, we've went through 4 different iterations of onboarding. We'll have a 5th by the end of September, because it's absolutely necessary to do so. That's the future, is just change. And we probably don't know everything that we're going to be doing in the next year, because it's going to come at us pretty fast and heavy probably to start the year, and we'll figure it out.
Yeah. A lot of the value that our readers gain out of interviews and content like this falls to those that are kind of just starting in the industry. And we love to present the perspective of veterans to them. So in that vein, if it's kind of 2 questions, but they're related. If you could talk to your 17-year-old self about a career in financial services, if that was even on the plate at 17, who knows, what would you say? Or if a novice banker comes to you for advice, how do I succeed? How do I advance? What does this industry mean? Is this is the potential there to make a long-term career out of this? And how do I do that? What would you say? So kind of a 2-pronged question. You're free to address it any which way. I guess, Keith, we can start with you and take it from the top down.
Okay, I guess since I'm the furthest away from 17,
we may be.
I can hardly remember that. I'm testing my memory, Dan. So
when I was 17, it was horse and buggy time. So
yeah, me too. But thinking back, that so I never considered being a banker. Just like I never really considered going in the Army. So these things occurred because I had to make decisions about getting an education and what I was going to do, and so I ended up coming out of the Army, and the furthest thing from my mind was ever being a banker. And it just, so I tried a few other things. I was in the restaurant business. I was a broker as well, like a stockbroker. And I met somebody who was an executive at was then a bank called NCMB, which was then became Nations Bank, which then became Bank of America. So it was the Hugh McCall, who some of us old timers remember that name, Hugh McCall, who really was this guy who started the whole Bank of America organization. So I got caught up in that, and then I was like, once I got into that organization, it was like, wow, because it was growing like rapidly, and it was cool, well managed, well led, and I got really excited about being. I said, finally, I found something that I really like doing. And the other part that I really liked about banking, and I think this would resonate with today's younger generation, because as I understand, and I have young kids myself, and it seems like everybody's looking for meaning in their work. They don't want to just do a job. It's not, yes, it's about money, but we want to really feel like we're making a difference and having an impact and helping people. And there's no better way, I think, than really being in the banking industry. It's just a way to help people and feel really good about what you do every day. And I think that's across the board, from community bankers to people who work in large organizations, just banking in general. I think that's an appeal of a lot of people. The other thing I would say to my 17-year-old self is learn more about technology, because my 17-year-old self, that was like 70 something, and I'd be saying, when these computers start coming out, learn as much as you can about them. But that's true today too, right? So more so than ever. And I would say to young people today, it's AI, right? Like, is AI going to be the next internet? I mean, that's what I'm wondering right now. And I'm saying, is this that next huge thing? And it sounds like it might be. I don't know. But, if I was 17, that's the thing I would really be trying to figure out right now. So
That's a good transition. We'll stick on tech for a second, Corey, go to you, because obviously the tech treadmill started running quickly and has only increased in speed since then. So
Yeah, I think, well, key first, I think AI is the next internet. I think it already is becoming that, right? And the
as a
thing,
writer, that scares me to death. I got cards on the table. It
look,
frightens me.
as a technologist, it scares me to death because I don't know that we've understood how we're going to utilize it in a meaningful way just yet, right? It's a shortcut today for a
Yeah,
lot of people.
yeah.
The concern I have is that the more we push in with technology, the further we get away from the human connection. What we need to find out and what we need to make sure we're doing with AI and all this technology is connecting it back to the human element. Give us more time to be more human and more connected. That's important for me. But if I had to talk to my 17-year-old self, I probably would just say, don't try to fit in, right? If you're going to go into this new industry, this new thing at 17, go find the gaps. Go find the things that you could do to make someone, a company, an organization, an industry better. And don't listen to what everyone else tells you is the way to do it. Just go out there and make mistakes and do the things that you think are intended well, and it'll net a positive result. And that took a little while for me to learn because coming out of the military, I had all these ideas, all these things, but I didn't know banking, and I kind of felt like the odd man out for a while. And when I kind of came to the realization that that was kind of a good thing, I'd already burned a couple of years, and so 17-year-olds just go in and break stuff.
That dichotomy, it's occurring to me. We've discussed how relational banking is. It's person to person. It's the shoe repair shop guy coming in and
Yep.
needing capital. Very human, you know, understandable. And yet there's this layer over the industry of ChatGPT and all this sort of, the next gizmo and gadget. So just seeing that dichotomy is, and as you pointed out, I'm not sure it's occurred to me as clearly as it has since you explained it.
Yeah, no, and But that's our job, right? As community bankers, it's our job to connect the dots so that we utilize these things ethically and responsibly to make a greater impact in our communities.
Yeah, because
And
a move of the needle a little either way. I mean, if you're
absolutely.
too sort of tech fearful, you're falling behind. If you're too tech hungry, you're leaving customers behind.
Yeah, and me and Keith, I know, and under Drew as well, we open a lot of bank accounts with different organizations because we just want to see what the experience is. And I'll tell you, I opened a bank account with a very large national digital player, not a bank, but they pretend to be one. And I didn't use the account for a while, right? I'd say like a year and a half. I hadn't used the account. I went to go get back in it and test some things, and I was locked out. My account got closed. Totally get it, but I couldn't get a person on the phone. I couldn't get anything resolved, and the solution I'm getting via email was to create a new email address and try to open a new account. And I was like, see, that's the problem, right? Is you have the bank, relationship that's probably can make sure that you can have access to your bank account, but they're not good technology, or you go to the ones with really good technology, but they don't have the human element. It's where's that bridge?
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Drew, talk to your
Okay.
17-year-old self.
So I've got probably one piece of advice that's more professional, and then another piece that's more kind of just like of a life advice. But from the professional end of it, I would say to my 17-year-old self, go find a mentor and be bold. Reach out to, for example, in the banking industry, reach out to the Keith Costellos and every bank CEO that you can. And the reason being is, like, I feel like if you can start developing your network before you could even legally start drinking, I mean, by the time you're in your 20s and 30s, you could have one of the most powerful Rolodexes. Many people will, if a 17-year-old person reaches out to a bank CEO and says, I need your help, or I just want 30 minutes of your time, I would venture to guess that most of these people would give you that time. Now, if I reached out to a CEO, they're like, leave me alone, or who is this weirdo? But I feel like people inherently want to help young people, and you should avail yourself of that opportunity. The other thing that's completely not work related, I would encourage young people, maybe not 17, but out of college, if you have the means to do it, just leave, go somewhere else. Like, go to Europe, go wash dishes, bartend, go surf in Costa Rica, just go get lost for a year, because you got plenty of time to work. Maybe it's more than a year, but I feel like we're, as a society, especially, this is the way I was raised, you go to high school, you go to college, the day you get back from college, you go to the military or you start working, and it's this kind of this pre-routed map. And I know a couple people that didn't do that, and they're equally as successful and have great stories. And I feel like that's something that's kind of missing with a lot of young people. So I know a lot of parents would probably be upset at me for giving this advice, but I think that would be really cool if more young people can do that.
Yeah, I've got three girls in their late 20s, early 30s, and each one of them sort of had their go and explore moments, and I think they're all better for it. I agree with you.
That's great.
We were lucky enough to be able to help them out with that. But yeah, once that door closes, and I could say that as someone, at this stage of my life, once those doors start to close, they really close. It's really hard to go back on if you're interested in sort of a self-discovery journey like that. It's really tough after X number of years.
Yep.
Anyway, we're going to land the plane. I don't really have anything else unless one of you or all of you want to give some kind of final thoughts about all this. I'm not sure, Keith, if you've got yet more or anything you want to cap this off with.
I have one last thing, and that
Sure.
is that I would say to those who are so inclined, think about starting a bank. And it's not for everybody, but we need more community banks, and you know, I wouldn't say start it right off the bat, right? Go work at a bank, learn, understand banking. But one of the things I did that I waited too long to start a bank. I didn't start a bank until I was 50. And, that's why I'm glad to see like Drew and Corey, these guys are in their early 40s, jumped into this thing. And I think, there are opportunities out there to do this and to learn. And it's such a great experience. And after you do that, like I said, so I've sold 2 banks now and started 2, right? Not the same ones, but it's I think once you go through that and you actually are involved in a startup, and that's why we've been able to bring the same people back, because it's so much fun and it's such a great experience. And I think these guys, we've had some hard times. I'm looking at Drew and Corey right now. I mean, we've had some times where I'm sure, we were like,
fun?
what the
You
hell
really?
are
This
we
is
doing?
fun?
Whose idea was this? But as we look back now, and the closer you get to achieving your goals, it's such an amazing, fun thing to do. And I know, we're just getting started. So it's, I would say, think about that if it's in your DNA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. Drew, any final thoughts?
Yeah, well, to Keith's point, you would think that if another banker wanted to start the bank, you would view them as a competitor and, I don't want to help this person out. But one thing that I've observed with Keith, and Keith is chair-elect of the Florida Bankers Association and is networking with a lot of community bankers, but there's a bank down in Miami that is a de novo, and Keith has helped the bankers start this bank. And so it's almost kind of a community in and of itself, where we want to help other bankers succeed, because it's better for us, frankly, if more community banks kind of sprout up across South Florida. So that's something that is unique, and I think that if someone is going to be launching a de novo, they should reach out to people like us. I would rather them learn from our mistakes and not repeat those same mistakes when they're launching their own de novo.
My side, Dan, I'll just kind of highlight what these 2 guys are saying, right? We need more banks. There's a lot of opportunity here to do some really good stuff. I mean, technology isn't going to stop evolving in the next couple of years. It's going to keep going. And because of that, customer expectations are going to keep growing. And because of that, there's a ton of regulatory changes that are going to be coming down the pipe. And so those things may, for some, seem like reasons not to do it. And for those people, stay away from it, right? Don't go start a bank. But for the ones who that kind of excites, figure out what you want to do. Figure out where you fit in. And to Drew's point, reach out. Yeah, we've absolutely helped a ton of de novos. I know even when we were going through the process of trying to get our charter, we were helping other banks with policies and procedures and things like that to try to get their charters. So there's definitely a ton of resources out there. The regulators are not as scary or against this as most people want you to believe. The FDIC, the Office of Financial Regulations from the state of Florida, have been good friends and colleagues to the bank, and they've made us better from the recommendations we've got from them. So tackle it.
What problems are your customers running into now that you want to solve that you guys haven't figured out yet? Like, what's the next thing that you want to fix for them?
I think it's connecting the data. I think it's connecting all these disparate systems that these companies have to use to manage their business day to day, and centralizing that in a way that we can create a single pane of glass view to predicting what it is that's coming down the pipe. When am I going to need capital? How am I going to transverse this? Do I have the right banking relationship to get that done? Do I have that line of credit waiting for me? I think it's in the utilization of data that banking is going to evolve substantially. And I think, you look at what's happening, in the EU and in other countries with open banking and, a lot of the different regulations and stuff that have been established because of that, that's come into the U.S. And so for customers and the people who, utilize banking today, on top of all this cyber risk and fraud and everything else that happens, it's going to be very, very important that banks get this right in the United States, that we help people leverage their data in a protected and meaningful way.
I think that's huge, and I appreciate you sharing that.
Sure.
Something like that, like if I'm a customer of a bank, okay, these guys are forward looking. They're not sleepy, right? If I'm an employee looking to make a change and I believe in the same things that you guys believe in, that's a very, very powerful statement you just made to help recruit like-minded people. And
Yeah,
if I'm
'cause
a shareholder looking to invest, that, I think that's really powerful too. Go ahead, Corsar.
Yeah, because most institutions across all industries look at data from a marketing and sell, like how do I cross sell? How do I use the data to make more money? But the reality is we as bankers can take the data and help our customers make more money, which in turn makes us more profitable and more successful as well. And so if we can live and breathe that mission statement via this thing that I absolutely believe is coming down, very fast and heavy, that's a win-win.